I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Thursday, September 17th, 2020. The time is 10:14 in the morning, and this hearing is being conducted virtually, that is live via Zoom video conference broadcast. The subject of this morning's hearing is to hear testimony regarding 5 bills pending in the Committee of the Whole. And those bills are, first, Bill 23-522, entitled closing a portion of Chesapeake Street Southwest, Magazine Road Southwest, and Keel Avenue Southwest, the removal of building restriction lines associated with the portion of Chesapeake Street Southwest being closed, and the transfer of jurisdiction back to the Secretary of the Navy of the portion of Keel Avenue Southwest being closed in parcels 251/55, 251/56, 242/32, 252/62, 259/1, 259/11, 259/14, and 259/16 in Southwest Washington, D.C. Surveyor's Order 14-21786, Act of 2019. This legislation was introduced last October 31st, 2019, at the request of the mayor. This property lies within the fence line of the Navy's Bellevue housing complex. The second bill is Bill 23-562, which thankfully has a short title. The last that I read was supposedly a short title. We may fix that when we mark up the bill. Bill 23-562 is entitled Closing of Columbia Quarter Alley in Square 5860, Act of 2019. This legislation was introduced on November 26, 2019 by Councilmember Trayon White. The purpose of this bill is to close a 15-foot wide public alley in Square 5860 bounded by Howard Road Southeast and Suitland Parkway and the U.S. Botanic Garden Nursery in Ward 8. This will facilitate a private development. The third bill is Bill 23-580, entitled The Closing of a Public Alley in Square 2892, SO 19-47478, Act of 2019. This legislation was introduced by Councilmember Nadeau on December 13th, 2019. The stated purpose of this bill is to facilitate a private development by closing a portion of a public alley in Square 2892 bounded by Lamont, this says Lamont, I'm guessing that's Lamont Street, Georgia Avenue, Kenyon Street, and Sherman Avenue Northwest in Ward 1. The next bill is Bill 23-656, which is entitled The Closing of a Public Alley in Square 740, SO 18-41567, Act of 2020. This legislation was introduced on February 5th, 2020 by Councilmember Allen. The stated purpose of this bill is to close a portion of a public alley in Square 740, which is bounded by K Street Southeast, 1st Street Southeast, L Street Southeast, and New Jersey Avenue Southeast. This will facilitate a private development. I actually think that this might be related to DC Water headquarters. The next bill is Bill 23-784, which is entitled Closing of Public Streets and Alleys and Dedication of Land for Public and Alley Purposes adjacent to Squares 3039, 3040, and 3043. SO 17-21093 and SO 17-21094, Act of 2020. The stated purpose of this bill is to close a portion of Morton Street Northwest adjacent to squares 3039 and 3040, to close a portion of public alley adjacent to square 3039, to accept the dedication and designation of 6th Street Northwest, Luray Place Northwest, and an extension of Morton Street Northwest adjacent to squares 3039, 3040, and 3043 for public street purposes, and to accept the dedication of land adjacent to 3039 for public alley purposes. This bill relates to the New Communities Project at Park Morton Public Housing Complex in Ward 1. Sorry, as I was struggling through these titles, there seem to be some typographical errors in the notices from the secretary or in the measures as introduced. In any event, we will be hearing testimony in order regarding each of these, and the record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. That is, the record will close at 5 p.m. on October 1st, 2020. The way this hearing will proceed, we are limited to 3 hours, so we will conclude at 1 o'clock or earlier. We will be taking the bills in turn. We have witnesses, in order to testify, had to have registered so that we can admit you onto the Zoom platform as what is called a panelist. So we will be admitting for testimony the witnesses for Bill 23-522. Following that, the witnesses for Bill 23-562, and so forth. We will hear from the government at the end of this hearing, not with regard to each bill separately. So let us begin with the witnesses for Bill 23-522. The short version of the short title is closing of a portion of Chesapeake Street Southwest, Magazine Road, Keel Avenue Southwest. We have 2 witnesses, Holland Hargrove, who's with the Naval Facilities Engineering Command, and Joan Plessy Redfern, who's also with the Naval Facilities Engineering Command of Washington. If you are ready, I see Holland Hargrove. I don't know if Ms. Plessy Redfern is joining us.
Yes, I'm not quite sure if she's joining us, but I am definitely here. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm exhausted from reading the short titles of those bills. Why don't we begin, Mr. Hargrove?
Yes, and I'm going to be very brief. This project is the closing of Magazine Road and Keel Avenue, and as you can see, all the parcels that are associated in the map that you have before you. The streets are in the middle of federal jurisdiction, basically in the middle of a federal installation of Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, and so therefore they just weren't transferred years back to the Navy, and so they're still in DC custody and control. But all the adjacent land around the property is Navy owned, and so we just basically are asking to transfer the property, the streets, to the Navy, since it's in the middle of a military installation.
That concludes your testimony?
Yes, that's basically what I mean. I don't know if you want to know anything else. I mean, that's the, in essence, the what we're trying to do here.
It would be great if we have a copy of your statement. Can you provide that?
Yeah, you just need me to put it on a piece of paper or what?
Yes,
okay,
that would be helpful.
All right, I'll send it via Mr. Stum.
That would be excellent.
Okay.
Let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you aware of any objections from any utilities or from any government agencies?
The utility companies had objections, but we went ahead and cleared up all the objections with them, and so then they submitted all information back to say that all the objections have been lifted and they were good to go. So there are no objections right now as it stands.
Okay, and the intent This is a joint base, so I can't say the intent of the Navy, can I? I would say what the intent of the command is to keep the streets functional, but just because this action would be to legally close them.
Correct. So what's going on is that there is because the streets have kind of like, I guess, changed their use kind of from when that, when it's used before its prior use. There is like a house on the corner of on the corner of I think between, like right at the corner of Keel and Magazine where they meet together. I think there's a house right there. The rest of it is still streets, but there's a house right there. And so basically the whole idea is to definitely demolish that house that sits right there on those at the corner of those two streets. But that's what's going on. But anyway, yes, I mean, functionally, it will just become part of the military base because it's already within the military base anyway.
Not that this is important to the legislation, but has the Naval Research Lab, that's the facility where these streets are located, correct?
No, it's not on the Naval Research Lab. It's on Naval Research Lab is a separate military installation from Joint Base.
It's on the joint base.
Correct.
Hasn't the joint base been there forever?
Yes, it has.
So how did the streets get declared as DC public streets?
That's what I actually don't know how that actually happened. And so we just know that it is the case that it's a DC street. And, the surveyor's office looked it up and it's in fact a DC street. So we're basically just trying to correct the wrong here.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions. Give me just a second. Hold on. I'm going to mute myself. I don't think, Mr. Hargrove, that I have any other questions for you, but please give us your statement. If that would be helpful. And the statement could go beyond what you said orally here, just to kind of explain a little bit more the intent. Some of that may be in the file, but it would be helpful if we just had a little bit more from you.
Okay, so yes, sir. This is my first time testifying, so I worked a lot through the surveyor's office. And so, I submitted all the information to them and, we worked it all through the whole system to now. So I just didn't know exactly, they have everything. So I can kind of just compile it and maybe put together, as I said, a quick statement and some attachments.
Well, we have their file. So,
okay.
So you don't need to provide that, but let me, I hope that this has been a positive and fulfilling experience for you since you said this is your first time. Because we'd love to have you come back, although I guess there would need to be some business. What we will do, the record closes in 2 weeks. And then at some point this fall, we will, unless there's some objections that I'm unaware of, we will, over the next few weeks, prepare the legislation for adoption by the council together with a committee report. And so the committee report will go into some explanation and background, speak to what the intended use of the property or the rights of way is. That's why I'm asking for a little bit more from you. And we just try to give a little bit more of an explanation, if you will.
Okay.
So I have to make probably some technical corrections to the legislation. It's just all part of the markup process. And that won't begin until 2 weeks from now. Could actually begin, I mean, we could actually vote on it October 6th. I'm not promising that, but those are our next steps. And so having your statement with a little bit more just narrative about this is helpful.
Absolutely. I will send that, as I said, by way of Mr. Stone.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hargrove. And you're excused, and we're going to turn to the next bill. Next bill is Bill 23-562, closing of Columbian Quarter Alley in Square 5860 Act of 2019. We have 4 witnesses, and we're going to admit all of them into the room. Salim Adolfo, who's a commissioner with ANC HC07. Megan Hutto Cox, who is a lawyer with Goldston and Stores, at least I believe a lawyer. Britt Snyder with Red Brick LMD LLC, who that would be the developer, and Robert Schiesel, who's with Grove Slade, who's a transportation consultant. Do we have everybody yet?
I believe we do.
That's easy for you to say, but the commissioner, our ANC commissioner, I think is not on yet. Why don't we proceed? And if the ANC commissioner knocks on the door, we'll let them in. I speak figuratively, but they have the registration, so they could get into the attendee room, I believe, and then they have to let us know to let them into the panelists. How do you want to proceed? Miss, is it Hutto Cox?
Hutto Cox.
Hutto Cox. Do you want to go first and then the other two?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee of the Whole. I am Megan Hutto Cox with Woolston and Stores. I, along with my colleague John Epting here today, serve as the Zoning and Land Use Counsel for Red Brick LMD. We have one witness here this morning to present testimony in support of Bill 23562, Britt Snyder, a principal at Red Brick. We also have Robert Schiesel with Grove Slade Associates with us today, who is available to answer questions. On September 14th, we submitted to the Committee of the Whole our statement and materials in support of the proposed alley closing. As we noted in the statement, this application satisfies all applicable requirements of the DC Code, and the approval of this legislation will further the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and the zoning regulations for this Northern Howard Road zone to provide significant housing, affordable housing, and a mix of commercial uses adjacent to the Anacostia Metro Rail Station. The applicant seeks approval to close the alley to facilitate the master Columbian Quarter development on either side of Howard Road between South Capitol Street on the west and I-295 and the Anacostia Metro Rail Station on the east. The master plan for the Columbian Quarter includes a mix of residential and office buildings with ground floor retail, activating this important corridor with high density development as called for by the comprehensive plan. The Northern Howard Road zone requires enhanced affordable housing and sustainability measures above and beyond typical projects. The closure of the alley will allow all of the properties on the north side of Howard Road to be consolidated to allow efficient planning. As set forth in our written materials, the alley is not necessary as it is not currently used or functional as an alley. The alley is surrounded by property owned by the applicant and dead ends at property owned by the National Park Service, which is supportive of the alley closing. The alley has created opportunities for illegal dumping on NPS property, and its closure will not detrimentally impact any surrounding property. Each affected agency and utility has approved or has no objection to the alley closure. In coordination with DDOT, our proposed alley closure plat shows 2 public easements accessed on the northern side of Howard Road. The area of the proposed easements actually exceeds the area of the alley to be closed and will facilitate access to the proposed Columbian Quarter development and potentially provide access if the Poplar Point area to the north is developed in the future. In its report, DDOT requested that these easements be labeled as non-restrictive easements. However, we propose to have the plat reflect these easements as public easements consistent with the Council's longstanding practice on closure plats. While DDOT's request for a non-restrictive easement is a little unclear, the public easements proposed will serve all of the needed transportation purposes typical of a public easement proposed in an alley closing. Further, keeping with this typical practice of providing public easements provides the applicant the flexibility to master plan with certainty regarding the ability to use areas below or above the public easement area. As we noted in our statement, the proposed development is subject to NHR zoning, which will require returning to the Zoning Commission for design review for the development of each building anticipated by the master plan. The applicant will continue to work with DDOT as part of these design review applications to address any transportation issues, as well as with neighborhood stakeholders. With that, I will turn it over to Britt Snyder to present his testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee of the Whole. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony in support of Bill 23562, closing of Columbian Quarter Alley in Square 5860. My name is Britt Snyder, and I'm a principal at Red Brick LMD. And Red Brick is a DC-based real estate investment and development firm with offices located in downtown DC and in historic Anacostia. We're very focused on bringing economic development and job opportunities to Ward 8, including the Anacostia and Congress Heights neighborhoods. Just earlier this month, we hired a Ward 8 general contractor, FNL Construction, to demolish the existing vacant buildings on the site and anticipate hiring another Ward 8 contractor to clear the site. We understand the importance of working with community businesses any chance we get. The alley in question is located between two parcels on Howard Road, both owned by Red Brick to the east and west, and also bounded to the north by National Park Service land. The Park Service has filed a letter in support of the alley closing. Furthermore, since 2015, Red Brick LMD has engaged significant outreach into the surrounding community regarding the alley closing process. Both ANCs 8A and 8C have provided letters in support of and continue to support the project. Red Brick is also coordinated with numerous district agencies, including Office of Planning, DDOT, and others, as well as utility companies, to review the project and proposed alley closing. Each of the affected agencies and utility companies has approved or has no objection to the application. OP specifically confirmed that the alley closing is consistent with the district's planning policies, including the policies of the comprehensive plan. Also, it should be noted again that the alley we are proposing to close will be replaced with public easements that exceed the area being closed. As you can see with the recent photographs that were submitted, the alley is not operational, has not been operational for years, and serves no purpose for the surrounding properties owned by Red Brick or the Park Service. The existing alley is not necessary for parking or loading access to any property, is not necessary for traffic maneuvering, and results in no adverse impacts to the transportation network. Today, the alley is not used for any legitimate purpose, although in the past, illegal dumping has occurred by using the alley. In the coming months, Red Brick will be working on a master plan to improve our properties, redesign that existing Howard Road streetscape with new streets, sidewalks, landscaping, and special paving features to provide a pedestrian-oriented street with activated ground floor uses, in addition to new vertical development. We look forward to sharing these plans with the city as they start to take shape. The alley closing allows for the most efficient use of the property on the north side of Howard Road by consolidating the properties which are bisected by the alley, and allows for better connections between buildings. The project will include a robust package of public benefits and amenities for both the surrounding community and the district as a whole, namely 12% inclusionary zoning affordable residential units where there is currently no housing at all. Therefore, the project will create net new market rate and affordable housing in an underserved area. In connection with the alley closing, we're proposing 2 new public easements from Howard Road as shown on the plat we provided to the surveyor's office. The public easements also allow for a potential connection to Park Service land if that property is ever developed in the future. In conclusion, the alley closing is an important component of effectuating future development of a new cohesive mixed-use environment that will promote health and wellness while improving the greater Anacostia neighborhood. Our hope is that the project will provide a new destination where the community can grow and people from all socioeconomic backgrounds can live, work, and play. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Mr. Cecil going to speak? Or is he just here to answer questions?
To answer questions.
He's just here for questions, yes.
Okay. So I'm a little bit, I need to be a little bit brought up to speed. I appreciate the testimony. I'm looking at a plat that I guess was your part of your submission. Ms. Huddle Cox, you said that you had submitted a package, and I have something that says application of Poplar Point RBBR, LLC, closing a public alley, and Exhibit B is a draft surveyor's office plat. So this is all from you, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the plat is, this plat was actually prepared by the surveyor. Is that correct?
Correct.
I asked that because sometimes, I've learned that sometimes we have plats that are not prepared by the surveyor. And so I want to be sure. This is not a criticism, but it drives me crazy that I look at these plats and I don't see the larger context. So Howard Road is at the bottom of the plat, and to the right, going up Howard Road would be the metro station.
That's correct. There's a little bit more context in Exhibit C on the site plans. You can see the alley shaded in orange, the Metro Rail Station to the right, South Capitol Street to the left, and Suitland Parkway and I-295 to the south. And then the second site plan on the next page kind of shows an even broader context with all the square and lot numbers.
Okay, and my version is just black and white, so I'll have to see if I can get a color version. You submit it in color, right?
Yes.
Okay. So looking at the surveyor's plat, what is, actually, I'm seeing from the next sheet, what is above at the top is the Anacostia Park?
Yes, that's correct.
And so looking at the surveyor's plat, it refers to parcel 231/8. Is that part of Anacostia Park?
Yes, it is.
And
That's the
reservation,
National Park Service property.
and reservation 343C is also part of the park?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And square 5600?
Yes. Square 5600, lot 800 is the large portion of the National Park Service property. You can see that a little bit more clearly on the second site plan in Exhibit C, I'm sorry.
Yeah, interesting that the park surface land is parcels, reservations, and squares. So what you're looking to do with this legislation is to close the public alley that runs, I'm guessing that's east-west?
So it runs north off of Howard Road and then hooks to run east-west in between Red Brick's property along Howard Road and the National Park Service property.
And you're closing all of that, but then replacing the part off of Howard Road with an easement.
Correct. We're proposing two public easements, one partially covering the area where the current alley is, but also extending so that it is wider. And then also that's a 20-foot wide public access easement, and then a 45-foot public access easement further to the left on the plat. And those public easements were based on conversations with DDOT in thinking about future planning for both this master plan and then potentially development on the National Park Service property.
Am I correct that the number 97 refers to another lot?
That's correct. That's lot 97 in square 5860.
And who owns that?
Red Brick also owns that.
Okay.
That will be part of the master plan.
So Red Brick is looking, I'm assuming there's going to be a subdivision with regard to lots 1025 through 1031?
Yes,
And that will become one record lot, presumably one record lot, and developed and served by the alley, the 20-foot alley, as well as the 45-foot alley.
correct.
And then lot 97 may be developed in the future, and that would be served as well by the 45-foot alley, as well as whatever else is planned.
That's correct.
Okay. That's helpful. Now, in your testimony, I am feeling so rusty here, and I apologize. The DDOT requested non-restrictive easements, and what you are proposing in this plat reflects is public easements. Remind me what a non-restrictive easement is?
We weren't exactly sure what DDOT's request was referring to. My understanding from some other projects with DDOT, when they ask for a non-restrictive easement, it's essentially to completely give that space to DDOT, both for maintenance, but also to kind of do whatever they would like to plan with it. And given the uncertainty that we had around exactly what the non-restrictive easement was, we're proposing to keep it as a public easement, which is consistent with the alley closure plats that we've seen out of the council, and I believe meets all the transportation goals that DDOT is asking for with these public easements, but also, gives Red Brick the certainty around planning as to how these would typically work. And part of the, as Mr. Snyder and I mentioned, part of the master planning process is to make sure that all of the buildings can achieve, their maximum height, which may require building connections. And so that's part of the reason that we want to ensure that we're consistent with the public easement language.
I think sometimes restrictive might also refer to whether there is any building projection over it. Is there any building projection with this development?
Well, there will likely need to be building connections. The master planning process is still going on, but building connections over some of the public access easement areas with obviously sufficient clearance for vehicles to be able to go through, but building connections to create a single building for zoning purposes in order to meet maximum height allowed within the NHR zone based on street frontage.
So that would be a connection between the what's currently lots 1025 through 1031 with whatever is built in lot 97?
Lot 97 or potentially lot 1037 on the other side.
Okay.
So essentially the portion in the middle, as you noted, lots 1025 through 1031, would need a building connection to one of the lots on either end that has frontage on a street wide enough to gain the maximum height allowed under the zoning regulations.
Maximum height being at the point of measurement? Is that what you're referring to? That may not have made sense, but is lot 97 or 1037 higher?
No, not for purposes of the building height measuring point, but for purposes of street frontage under the Height Act.
Because Howard Road is not as wide a street as...
Correct.
What's the street adjacent to 1037 and adjacent to 97?
Adjacent to 97 is South Capitol Street, and adjacent to 1037 and some other property there is I-295.
Okay. Well, I can't picture this, but in any event, both would allow a taller building.
Correct.
And DDOT is aware of this and they have no objections that you're aware of.
So I'm not sure. So they are aware of the proposed building connections. That's been part of the master planning process from the beginning. And we've had numerous conversations with them around the master planning process. And we also, as noted in my testimony, will be required to return to the zoning commission every time we wish to construct a building on these lots, because the NHR zoning requires design review. And so we would also be coordinating with DDOT with any of those future development plans for specific buildings.
Yeah, what is NHR?
Northern Howard Road. It's a special purpose zone specifically for this area near the Anacostia Metro Rail Station along Howard Road.
Let me just check with staff, see if there are any other questions. Hold on a moment.
Sure.
I do not have any other questions at this time. I may, if I do later, I will communicate it to you. You're going to stick around for the hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Just in case, although I'm not quite sure how that works with the virtual platform, but I think for the moment, I've asked all the questions I can. So thank you all, each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're excused. We'll take up the next bill. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll hear from the government at the end. So thank you all very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, hold on. Councilmember Nadeau has joined us, but I assume that's with regard to the next bill? Okay, so then with regard to Howard Road, you all are excused. Thank you. So the next bill is Bill 23-580, closing of a public alley in Square 2892, SO 19-47478, Act of 2019. We have two witnesses, Kyrus Freeman from Holland and Knight and Eric Zuckerman, who's with ZP Georgia LLC. Let me ask Councilmember Nadeau, did you want to make any statement at this point?
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, Bill 23-580 closes a small dead-end portion of a public alley in Square 2892, bound by Georgia Avenue, Kenyon Street, and Lamont Street. Currently, this location houses a small shed that had once been used for equipment storage, is currently vacant and in disrepair. And while the applicant, CP Georgia LLC, had intended to request this alley closure to incorporate into a planned unit development, that proposal is no longer moving forward. The closed space is planned to be incorporated into the rear seating areas of the applicant's neighboring service establishments. The applicant's properties and tenants have been a positive addition to the Georgia Avenue corridor, and we look forward to hearing from today's witnesses and moving forward with the legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. So we have Mr. Freeman and Mr. Zuckerman. Yes. How do you want to proceed?
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, Councilmember Nadeau, and congrats on your new addition. It's my first time seeing you since then. Chairman Mendelson, I will make a quick, brief statement, and then Mr. Zuckerman will be available to answer any questions that you have. So I just want to make sure you have our submission dated September 11th, 2020. Our submission kind of describes our project, and I'll go through that. So as you know, we filed an application to close a 700+ square foot portion of a dead-end stub alley. The alley closing does not disrupt the public alley system in Square 2892 and will not interfere with access to or from any development in the square. The alley closing is being requested to ensure that the area to be closed is properly maintained, and as Councilmember Nadeau said, the closing would allow for additional usable outdoor space associated with the neighborhood serving retail and service uses located in existing buildings on the surrounding lots. Our package, I will just point out two responses. Behind tab C is the Office of Planning report. Page 3 of the OP report near the bottom, it says a major impact from a land use and physical character aspect, and these are all positive impacts, are the expanded commercial rear yard would be an asset to existing and future businesses. Retail spaces with access to the rear outdoor space would or could contribute to increased diversity in the mix of goods and services available, with the potential to attract new businesses while retaining existing establishments. Enclosure of this dead-end segment of the public alley, when consolidated with existing rear yards, would serve to allow tenants to better utilize and modernize this space. I think this is particularly important now, kind of given where we are with COVID-19 and the need for space to socially distance. I would also note in the prior case, you asked about a plan that showed more of the overall area. On page 2 of the OP report, you can see an image. Hopefully your copy is in color. You could see an image that shows the entire, well, almost the entire square with a black line around the small dead-end portion of the alley to be closed. And finally, jump into Exhibit D, the DDOT report. They confirm that the proposed alley closing would not disrupt the remaining public alley network, would not prevent alley access to any other properties in the square. There are no DDOT assets in the subject area that would be impacted by the closure, and the subject portion of the alley is not necessary for vehicle circulation or future transportation needs. So it's a pretty short and direct report indicating that the application should be approved. So we believe that the record is complete. We meet all standards for the alley closing. And again, Mr. Zuckerman is available to answer any questions that you may have. But that concludes our direct presentation.
Thank you. So Mr. Zuckerman doesn't have a statement.
He has one if you want to hear from him.
No, I want to hear. I love to hear from witnesses,
Sure.
but they have to be unmuted in order for me to hear them.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Good morning, Chairman and Council Member. My name is Eric Zuckerman. I'm a member of ZP Georgia LLC, and I'm testifying in support of the requested alley closing. ZP Georgia LLC owns all of the property that abuts the portion of the dead end alley proposed to be closed. Our related entities also own and operate a number of other properties on Georgia Avenue Northwest in close proximity to this site, such as District Dogs, which is located at 3210 Georgia Avenue. We own rental apartments located at 3220 and 3222 Georgia Avenue. Hook Hall, which is located at 3400 Georgia Avenue, and the Midlands and Story District, which are located at 3321 and 3335 Georgia Avenue, as well as 3301 Georgia Avenue, where Call Your Mother is located. We've been strong supporters of the community. For example, in conjunction with Georgia Avenue Thrive, we hosted the Winter Festival at 3400 Georgia Avenue. And we've financially supported the Fall Festival. We've also hosted movie nights at 3400 Georgia Avenue. So we intend to utilize the dead end portion of the alley to be closed as additional usable outdoor space and seating for the retail and service uses of our property, which has frontage on Georgia Avenue. We will improve and maintain what is currently an unused and unmaintained portion of the alley. In fact, we're currently in the process of redeveloping 3212 Georgia Avenue for use as a wine bar, St. Vincent's, which we anticipate opening hopefully this month. Having the additional outdoor space is especially important now, given COVID-19 and social distancing requirements for retail and service establishments. Moreover, we believe that closing the unused portion of the alley would result in a number of community and economic benefits to the district, including, for example, adding land to the tax rolls and the payment of real estate taxes, and ZP Georgia will now be responsible for all upkeep, maintenance, and security of the land. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerman. Can we have a copy of your statement? I don't think it was included in the packet.
Sure.
And so that I understand, does ZP Georgia LLC own lots 879
Yes, we do.
and 118
Yes,
and 105,
yes.
as well as several other lots that you mentioned in your statement?
Sure.
Why did you abandon the PUD? It expired, but I'm just curious to know why you decided not to go forward with it.
It was just a business decision at the time. We weren't ready, we're prepared to go forward with the PUD. So build a building.
It doesn't have anything to do with the state of the economy today.
No.
So the 118, lot 118 is where the restaurant is that will use this alley?
Yes.
And I know you said it, but I don't remember. The name of the restaurant is, not that it's critical, but
St. Vincent's, it's a wine bar.
and you're not aware of any community objections or any other objections,
No,
Zuckerman?
no.
Mr. Freeman, all the utilities are okay and all the government agencies are okay at this point?
Yes, sir.
Let me turn to Councilmember Nadeau. Do you have any questions? Councilmember Nadeau?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any additional questions. We're just looking forward to moving forward with this. Thank you.
Let me just double check that I don't have anything else before I excuse you. I don't have any other questions. Mr. Zuckerman or Mr. Freeman, please get us your statement. That would be helpful. And
Okay.
thank you, each of you. And at this point, you're excused. And I'm going to turn to the next bill.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So the next bill is Bill 23-656, closing of a public alley in Square 740. SO 18-41567, Act of 2020. There are three witnesses. Christine Scheiker with Holland and Knight, Jimmy Dodson with What's on Second Properties LLC, and Mary Ramsey, who's with Wiles Mensch Corporation. Let's see, who do we have? We've got everybody. How do you want to proceed? Ms. Scheiker, do you want to begin?
Yes, good morning, Chairman Mendelson. I see Councilmember Allen is joining as well. My name is Christine Scheiker. I'm with the law firm of Holland and Knight, and we are land use and zoning counsel for the applicant in the alley closing for Square 740, which is the subject of the hearing today. Jimmy Dodson is with us on the panel. He is with Paradigm Development Company, and he's representing the applicant. We've also had Mary Ramsey and Marcelo Lopez join from Wiles Mensch. They are here only to answer technical questions, and they will not be providing a direct statement. Before proceeding with my brief opening statement, I'd like just to make sure that you received a copy of our pre-hearing statement, which sets forth how the applicant satisfies the statutory requirements, and it details our work and efforts in coordination with the agencies and utilities.
Dated September 11th. Yes, I have.
That is correct. We also had coordinated with Mr. Stum to have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if he could possibly pull that up, if that's available.
I'm getting a thumbs up.
Great, thank you.
I don't know what that means, but I got a thumbs up.
Perfect, that's great. We'll go with this first slide here. I wanted to provide some context. The alley closing is located in Square 740, which is in Southeast DC. You can see the square that is highlighted on the right-hand side. You mentioned in the opening statement that you thought this might be related to the DC water project.
Yeah, and it's not, I can tell.
It's not. Yeah, that one's I think coming a little bit later. This one is a little bit further to the north and is along New Jersey Avenue, First Street, K and L Street. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is a plat that the DC Surveyor's Office prepared, and it shows the existing public alley, which we are proposing to close. That is a 12-foot alley, and we are proposing to close it and rededicate with a public easement, a 20-foot alley that would be generally in the same location. This proposed easement would be 8 feet wider, so it's going to enhance the accessibility of trucks and cars accessing the developments within the project, and really just overall increase the functionality of that alley system. The alley closing will enable the applicant to proceed with the second phase of a residential development. All of the development in this entire square is owned by affiliates of Paradigm. The first phase is on the west side of the square. The alley closing will enable the second phase, which would front on New Jersey Avenue, to be connected below grade and above grade. That above grade connection would allow sharing of the amenities for the residents and for the rooftop areas. Mr. Dodson will walk you through the plans in just a moment. The site is zoned D5, and the proposal is fully compliant with that zoning designation. In addition, I will note that the closing of this alley does not result in any additional density for this project, because in the D5 zone, residential density is unlimited. With the exception of DC Water, which I'll address in just a moment, we have received no objections from all of the agencies and the utilities. Those responses can be found in Exhibits D through I of the pre-hearing statement that you have. Specifically at Exhibit D, there is a detailed evaluation by the Office of Planning supporting their conclusion of no objection. And at Exhibit D, you will see that DDOT originally objected to the application. We worked very closely with them on a series of conditions, including maintaining the alley easement open, not putting any barriers, to making sure there's just one overhead connection, and that we would maintain the alley. So there were a variety of conditions. We worked with DDOT to either evidence compliance already or to commit to future compliance as part of the alley easement. And therefore, DDOT did remove that objection and now has a statement of no objection in the record. At tab I, you'll see that DC Water is the only outstanding objection. They had noted that there was a 3-inch water line and a 12-inch combined sewer main in the alley. At the time that objection came out, our team worked with DC Water and obtained approval from them to remove and abandon those facilities. That work was completed in the spring of 2019. While the DC Water did inspect the work at that time, there have been some issues with the paperwork. And so therefore, in our most recent coordination with DC Water, they are going to come and re-inspect the work. We've provided them with evidence of the approvals, the photographs, and that they will, they have indicated as soon as they do that inspection, they will release their objection. It's our goal to get that before the record closes on October 1st. Finally, I will say that the applicant did work closely with ANC 6D, and Mr. Dodson will talk about that, and we do have unanimous support from them on the project. So if there aren't any preliminary questions, I will ask Mr. Dodson to go ahead and provide his statement.
Let's proceed with Mr. Dodson.
Excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Allen, and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Jimmy Dodson. I'm with Paradigm Development Company, and as Ms. Scheicher mentioned, our entity, What's on Second Properties LLC, is the applicant in this case, and we own the property on all sides abutting this alley. We appreciate your time and consideration of this alley closing bill. Our proposed alley closing reflects an important milestone, as it will facilitate the second phase of our multifamily project and will ultimately provide 548 new residential units in the thriving Navy Yard district. As part of this alley closing application, we will establish by easement a widened public alley in the same location. This public access easement will enhance connectivity and circulation within the square for the project. As Ms. Scheicher mentioned, our multifamily project is in Square 740 in the southeast quadrant of the district. It's a block north of the Navy Yard Metro Station and just a little north and a little east of Nationals Park. Earlier this year, we completed construction of the first phase of the project, which included 275 new units in lot 43, and we are currently in the process of leasing up these units. The second phase involves the construction of the second residential tower on the eastern portion of the square. The closing of the public alley will enable the completion of a connected below-grade parking garage between these two buildings, as well as an overhead pedestrian bridge on the penthouse level so that the building can share amenities for the residents. This second phase will contribute an additional 273 new units, as well as 5 affordable housing units that are otherwise not required. The proposed project is shown, I think do we have a slide, Exhibit C here? Yes, thank you. And it's Exhibit C in our statement of support, excuse me. The pedestrian bridge connects the two towers on the northern half of the square so that residents can share and access the amenities. The alley closing will also allow us to establish a consolidated underground parking garage that will serve the overall development. The project includes the dedication of a public access easement, which widens the alley from 12 to 20 feet, and all access to the parking garage will be taken from the alley easement. Furthermore, the alley easement will allow us access to 2 loading dock entrances in a manner consistent with DDOT standards. It will also allow us 2 entrances into the parking garage should one need any work or become encumbered in any way. We are very pleased to have support from the community with respect to the project and the associated alley closing. I personally have attended 2 open ANC community meetings to share the project plans, as well as walk through it with our ANC commissioner on several occasions. In coordination with the ANC, we're happy to provide 5 affordable housing units in the project, in the second phase, that is. These affordable units will be offered at 80% and will be identical in size and location to the market rate units. And the affordable units will vary in size from studio to 2 bedrooms and will be indistinguishable from the market rate units. In addition to this, the ANC also requested that we maintain the alley, which we had gladly agreed to do so. The alley closing will allow 2 residential buildings to have connectivity, while the alley easement will significantly enhance the functionality and circulation of the square. Our second phase will require 11 full-time construction jobs with our construction company, and ultimately the project will generate approximately 14 property management positions. Moreover, the multifamily project will attract a large influx of new residents into this area and stimulate that accordingly. This concludes my testimony regarding the subject alley closing and multifamily project at Square 740, and I appreciate your time today and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Dotson.
Chairman Mendelson, I will say, if we just want to step through a couple of the slides, you can get a better sense of what the project looks like. Mr.
Sure.
Schuman, there is the slide that shows how the access all comes off the widened alley. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the model of how the 2 buildings will be connected. Thank you.
So the connection is at the top level at the north of the 2 buildings.
That is correct.
And the alley, since there's no effect on density, and since you are going to continue to have what appears to be an alley, the only reason for doing the closing, I don't want to minimize it, is to enable that top floor connection and also to allow a parking garage that spans both sides of the square.
That is correct.
You said, Mr. Dodson, that the owner will maintain the alley. How is that reflected in any of the legal documents?
If I may, that will be included in the covenant that establishes the alley easement. We will include a maintenance covenant that the alley will be maintained by the owner. That is also where some of the other requests that DDOT asks for, such as that we would not block off the alley on either side and that we would only have 1 overhead connection. Those covenants will also be included in that alley easement establishment covenant, which will be recorded against the property.
I think I had another question. Oh, the 5 units sounds awfully few. Doesn't the inclusionary zoning apply to this property?
It does not, Chairman. The D5 zone is exempt from inclusionary zoning, so there would be no affordable housing required on this site. But in working with the community and in their effort to ensure that some affordable housing is provided, the applicant did voluntarily agree to add 5 units in.
That would be 5 on the eastern building. The western building, does that have any affordable units?
It does
It
not.
Okay. I may have a few additional questions in a minute, but let me turn to my colleague, Councilmember Allen. I'm calling on the council member, seeing only a black box on my screen. Just a moment. I'm being told that Councilmember Allen is not on the on this, so I'm not going to recognize him. Give me just a second again. I do not have any other questions. If I do, I'll get back to you. And as I mentioned before, the executive will testify at the end of the hearing. So you all are excused from the witness room. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
We will turn now to Bill 23-784. which concerns Park Morton. The short title is Closing of Public Streets and Alleys and Dedication of Land for Public and Alley Purposes Adjacent to Squares 3039, 3040, 3043. SO 17-21093 and SO 17-21094, Act of 2020. We have 7 witnesses, including the developer. We're going to welcome all of them into the witness room. Daniel Del Pialago with Empower DC, Mark Friend, who's listed as a public witness, William Jordan, Ashanta Hai, who's president of the DCHA Park Morton Resident Council, Kyrus Freeman with Holland and Knight, Robert Fossey, who's with the Community Builders, and Bua Benite, who's with Dante's Partners. I'll give a moment for everybody to get admitted.
Chairman. May I make an
Councilman Nadeau, did you want to make a statement while I'm pausing here?
Yes, please.
Okay, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman. This is an alley closing and street dedication bill. It will enable the construction of a multifamily building on Park Road that will deliver replacement public housing units for the Park Morton community. On strictly technical terms, an alley closing bill is not anything consequential, but we're fooling ourselves if we don't recognize that the future of Park Morton is, in so many ways, a conversation about the future of Ward 1 itself. And that's why this has been so intensely personal to residents, to neighbors, and to me. At the core of the vision for Parkview and Pleasant Plains has been the idea that it should be a model of an integrated neighborhood, a community helmed by its established residents, and accommodating of all types of families, backgrounds, and economic statuses. That future rests not only on what we build and the affordability we can achieve and maintain, it equally rests on the way neighbors talk to each other, influence their shared future, and relate to their community. This is as much a spiritual conversation as it is a technical one. I don't want to hand wave this away and say it's just a regular alley closing bill when it's clear there's so much more at stake here. It's been inspiring to me to see the community come together and act as a megaphone for the residents of Park Morton who've always deserved better by their city, and I hope that spirit of solidarity continues. This process has not been as straightforward as any of us would have liked. In many ways, we're now attempting to put together a puzzle that has lost some of its pieces, and I can't hide how upset that makes me. The only way to ultimately get to one-to-one replacement of public housing in a just way is to continue building those replacement units right now. The building that will be enabled by this legislation will not get us all the way to the 174 units that we need, just as the units at the Avenue building did not get us all the way there. The reason I introduced this legislation was to ensure that we continue to advance the promises I've made and recommitted to year after year. A clean and rightful one-to-one replacement was predicated on the timely delivery of the Bruce Monroe development. That project, which plans to deliver the remainder replacement public housing units, additional deeply affordable housing, and a new community park, was delayed for far too long by a lawsuit on the planned unit development. I want to be very clear. The court remanded the Bruce Monroe decision back to the Zoning Commission, but I still have every intention of seeing that part of the project through to completion. There will be no downgrading of the number of replacement public housing units, and I will not rest until we have built every last one of them and all of our families have a chance to return. What that leaves us with for the time being, however, is a Park Morton site that is still in need of improvement, that so many families have been forced to make work for far longer than they should have. This has led to a heartbreaking number of families leaving the site for other locations. Another detail I want to make clear, any resident that was on site in 2014 has the right to return, no matter where they currently may be. That commitment has been expressed in many forms, including in legislation that I introduced earlier this year. That being said, if we don't build something in Parkview, residents will continue to move off-site. Even if they're in Ward 1, as time goes on, they may be pulled further and further from this community. This bill is a direct response to the setback of the court's remand. It enables the construction of one new building at Park Morton, which will occupy the northern part of the site where there are already vacant buildings. Developing in this location, which unfortunately is enabled by the amount of families that have already left in the intervening years, is a strategy that has been asked for by a number of residents and allies. We know that we'll hear some testimony today regarding the Park Morton Equity Plan. I look forward to that, and I look forward to continuing to work with those who've been moving that forward. While the Wren cannot fully be the Build First site, I would love to see as many people who wish to be there as possible, or other neighborhood sites, and we'll continue to help families that want to use their vouchers to relocate there. But if we truly want to try and renegotiate the PUD on that building, which is already constructed and delivered, we would likely be here for another couple of years. I promise to continue to do everything that's in my power as a legislator to advance the cause of justice at Park Morton and in the neighborhoods that surround it. As a result of demands from residents and allies, I introduced a bill that codifies the right to return for public housing residents, not just for this project, but every public housing resident in the future. And we were able to find funding for new affordable homeownership opportunities for residents, and continue to look for an opportunity to create a limited equity co-op in the neighborhood for Park Morton residents to continue the legacy and the vision of Marie Whitfield. Enabling this building at the Park Morton site, which will allow already displaced residents of Park Morton to come back, does not negate any of those efforts. I think at this point, either I or a member of my staff has had at least one deep conversation with everyone on the witness list about this project. While there may not be total agreement on every element, I'm incredibly grateful to everyone that has taken the time to be here today. I think there is an incredible value in advocacy and agitation, especially when it comes from such dedicated people as Ms. Shanta High, who has held this Park Morton community together through sheer force of will. And I think without that advocacy, this project would not be as strong or as impactful as I know it will be. And I want to thank you, Chairman, for working with me to move this legislation forward in a timely manner. It's my hope as well that the language we worked on in the comprehensive plan will enable the Zoning Commission to resolve Bruce Monroe more concretely and help advance the vision of an inclusive, affordable neighborhood that we're striving for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So I'm going to proceed to the witnesses, and then we'll have questions. Mr. Del Pilago, if you would want to begin.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, council members. My name is Daniel Del Pielago, and I'm an organizer with Empower DC. We've been supporting the residents at Park Morton around the so-called redevelopment of their property. I say so-called because this new communities initiative redevelopment plan is one that from the onset does not benefit the residents of Park Morton. From what we are able to glean from the details DEMPED has provided to us, we only see that 57 public housing replacement units are planned for Park Morton for the footprint. Currently, 174 total units exist. A simple math analysis lets us know that there will not be enough units for one-for-one replacement of public housing, which is a tenet of the New Communities Initiative. Additionally, while the Build First site at Bruce Monroe is still held up with legal issues, residents cannot expect to be relocated in their neighborhood or ward. This plan, as we understand it, actually displaces residents and creates a loss of much needed public housing in our city. A resident I spoke with this week who was concerned about retaliation if she testified today, let me know the following. I have no idea when I'll come back or if I will come back. We are all being moved with no idea on what will happen. I will be moving soon now because I'm a voucher holder. I'm concerned about having to pay utilities at my new place, which will add an extra expense for me. I feel like our community is being destroyed. This underscores that we need to work on a better plan that residents are a part of, trust in, and have actionable rights around. Excuse me 1 second. The New Communities Initiative is a failed program which has not delivered on its goals. Therefore, moving forward with this markup and vote of Bill 23-784 at this point only serves to move this failed plan forward that does not benefit residents. A better plan is needed, which the Park Morton Resident Council and residents need to agree on before any further harm is caused. Council should also note that the Bruce Monroe LDA extension expires in December and will be coming back in front of you again soon. Please take into consideration that through your oversight, you can play a critical role in ensuring that this redevelopment and the New Communities Initiative in general need to be improved, as at the end of the day, it is only resulting in the displacement of longtime Black residents of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friend.
Dear Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Nadeau, and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Mark Friend, and I'm a homeowner in Ward 6 and a member of Stand Up for Racial Justice DC. I'm here to talk today about B23784 and urge the committee to hold off on its markup. Before I dive in, I would like to thank Councilmember Nadeau and their staff for reaching out to me and having a robust dialogue on this issue. I think we all agree that Park Morton is in an unacceptable shape right now and something needs to be done. Yet I'm concerned that due to the delay of the Build First site at Bruce Monroe from the lawsuit, there's a very real possibility that members of Park Morton will continue to be forced to find housing with the voucher program throughout the city, a process that we all know is difficult in the best of circumstances and will result in them moving out of their neighborhood. I know that the alley closure is just a first step in moving this project forward that must be done, but I urge the council to use this inflection moment to work closely with the residents of Park Morton, current and former, to develop a plan that will keep them in the neighborhood. How often do we see these redevelopments keep on the same pattern? Force people out of their homes, demolish public housing complexes, and fail to redevelop on-site or replace units at 1-for-1. Let's not let Park Morton become another example of this. I want DC to be affordable for a variety of people. I value our safety net, including public housing, because no one should be displaced, particularly during a pandemic. We must ensure that residents of Park Morton can remain in their neighborhood. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Friend. Mr. Jordan.
Chairman Mendelson and members, I urge the council not to move
Mr.
forward
Jordan,
with
do
this
you have
bill.
video? Do you have,
Yes, it may slow down, so I'll turn it on.
okay, if we have problems, you
I
can.
have a slow connection. Okay. I urge the council not to move this bill forward until the agencies responsible for the Park Morton NCI development, DNPAD and DHCA, enter into and complete good faith negotiations with the council at Park Morton to implement the Park Morton Equity Plan as part of the Park Morton NCI project. The current pie in the sky Park Morton NCI development plans, which have always placed the rights and interests of Park Morton residents at risk, are clearly no longer viable. The plan which is precipitating this alley closing only produces 57 of the required 147 replacement units, encourages the Housing Authority to continue to displace residents, over 70 to date, without Bill First, produce no new units until 2023. Overall, current Park Morton plans sport a funding gap of over $90 million. Worse, the development team will return to this council in the next month or so, asking for another extension to the Bruce Monroe LDA, which expires in December. Unfortunately, the purpose of the bill at this time is not to close the alley, but to close the door on Park Morton residents' pursuit of equity via the Park Morton Equity Plan. Again, I urge the council not to move forward with this bill, the Park Morton LDA extension, until DNPAD and the Housing Authority enter in good faith negotiations. I've included in my testimony a list of all the expenditures that I could come up with related to Park Morton and other new communities projects, over 36 million, and we haven't gotten one unit for the residents of Park Morton. I've also included some communications I did back in 2016, warning of the problems with the original plan. So I would hope the council will not move forward with this until we do have some good faith negotiations led by the resident council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, committee. Hello, my name is Ms. Shante. Hi, I'm the council at Park Morton's president. I'd like to take just a moment of silence for all the Black and Hispanic lives that have been lost in the Census Act of racism, if we will, please, just a moment. Thank you. Amen. I'm testifying in opposition of the legislation B-23-784, the closure of the alleys. There are many reasons as to why this should not happen, starting with the disruption of how I and many of my residents' lives are going to be disrupted. And many of us can enter and exit where we park on the DCHA privately permitted parking spaces. I'll begin by speaking of where we exit the alley at 610 Park Road, right here by the building. And we make the left on Park Road to go to the gas station, the bank, the post office, and the many other multiple establishments that we frequent on Georgia Avenue. Closing this alley will not only disrupt Park Morton's lives, but that of our neighbors who live in the townhomes adjacent to us, whose driveways are in the rear of their homes. If they haven't been properly informed or notified of this, I think that they should have some say as to why this alley should not be closed as well, especially the gentleman who lives directly, his house is directly beside the alley at 600 Park Road. And there are very few ways to enter and exit this property as it is. So please do not disrupt our lives abruptly with these changes. We have a number of residents remaining on this property who want to speak on this issue, but due to the fear of retaliation, they have asked Empower DC to speak anonymously for them. They submitted their testimonies to them. Also, the city should not insist on this action to move forward with the failed plan. And needless to say, with the many efforts of myself and my team, we brought forth the attention of the malfeasance and the dangerous NCI New Communities Initiative redevelopment plan. There is no other safe passage for entry onto Morton Street, so there is access to other alleyways that aforementioned residents such as myself and other residents in the homes can go about our daily lives. With the problematic element at the top of the street that congests the street, with traffic leaving us no other recourse to get home safely but to use the alleys. So I strongly advise that you do not vote for this and mark this up, because there's no solid plan in place, no guarantee for residents. There aren't enough units being built as promised. Residents are being displaced. There are no real guarantees for home ownership opportunities for present or future residents. And the time is now for the city to renounce the NCI redevelopment plan, to fully move forward and adopt and implement the Park Morton Equity Plan in its entirety, with all agreeable adjustments and or decisions being made by the council at Park Morton, our residents, our team, our affiliates. And we would like for the redevelopment team, DMPED and DCHA, to have a good faith meeting with us and our team to have a discussion on truly strategically implementing the PMEP, with all resolutions, terms, and or agreements being placed in writing in a legal and binding agreements or documents. And I want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. High. Mr. Freeman, do you want to speak next? I think the next two witnesses plus you are the development team.
Sure. Why don't we, if we could switch, I'll let Mr. Rob Fossey go, and then I will do the wrap up and conclusion after Mr. Fossey.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Nadeau, Ms. High, and my fellow testifiers today. I am Rob Fossey. I'm one of the partners on the redevelopment of Park Morton. I'm with the community builders, and we are developing this in partnership with Dante's partners. I am joined today by the principal of Dante's, Abou Benite, who is available to answer questions with me afterward, although I'll be providing our testimony. We welcome the opportunity to be with you today to discuss the alley closing and street dedication for the phased on-site redevelopment of the Park Morton site. Much as I think we've heard some today, much has transpired in the half dozen years since our team was selected for the privilege of working with residents, stakeholders, and an array of additional partners to redevelop Park Morton. This legislation will enable us to move forward with the phased redevelopment of the on-site Park Morton plan that will deliver 189 homes, 57 of which are replacement units for Park Morton residents. The first on-site phase will deliver much needed 43 replacement homes for Park Morton residents, 45 additional affordable homes, and 60 market rate or unsubsidized units. Contingent to relocation efforts and vacancies on site, we anticipate starting the 24-month construction period in that phase in late 2021 and complete in late 2023. The second on-site phase will deliver 14 replacement homes for Park Morton residents and 27 market and affordable home ownership opportunities. Also contingent to relocation efforts and vacancies, we anticipate starting the 24-month construction period on that phase in late 2023, early 24, and completing in early 2026. All affordable units, including the Park Morton replacement units, will remain affordable for the life of the project and will be built in a fully integrated manner that does not differentiate by resident income, so no distinction in layouts, materials, amenities, and is grounded in the belief that we are all equal. This legislation will allow us to make incremental progress toward a vision and mission that is larger than a single project or a single building. Integral to the housing redevelopment is the appropriately updated infrastructure that will better connect the Park Morton site with the surrounding neighborhood. Existing streets and alleys, as approved in the PUD, will be redesigned and rebuilt during the construction period. Upon construction completion, each phase of new streets and alleys built as part of the phase will be dedicated to the district. The plan includes an extended east-west Morton Street that will connect the site with Warder, a new north-south street, which will be named 6th Street, and a new east-west-south street south of the new Pocket Park to be redeveloped as part of the plan. That will be named Luray Place. Thus far, we've advanced the schematic design and initiated the design development plans of the Phase 1 on-site Park Morton plan that includes a 142-unit multifamily building along with 6 townhouses and flats. Alongside our public and private partners, we are resolute in our commitment to make Park Morton's redevelopment a success story. We cherish the support and partnership of the district that stands especially tall amidst failed federal policies to deliver on the promise of quality homes for all people. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Fossey. Mr. Benite, are you testifying?
No, I'm not. Rob basically captured all that. Yeah, it basically captured all that we're requesting for, and we look forward to answering any questions you might have.
I have a couple questions I'm going to ask, and I'm going to turn to my colleague, and then I'll have some more questions after that.
Mr. Chairman, I did want to make a quick statement and walk through,
Sure.
through some of the information. Thank you. Just again, for the record, I'm Kyrus Freeman, Land Use Counsel, on behalf of the applicant. I'm happy to hear some of the comments today about the desire to see the replacement housing delivered. Most of that replacement housing would be on the Bruce Monroe site. So I'd love to hear some of these advocates advocate for support of reapproval of that Bruce Monroe project, because that's where a lot of that replacement housing is, which we know is being challenged. Respectfully, the plan that's before the council today is our street and alley plan. We filed a pre-hearing submission. Again, I'm going to reference our packet filed on September 11th. And the focus today, we're closing 2 small portions of public alleys, and we're dedicating back, just to be clear, we're closing 13,503 square feet of area, and we're dedicating back 63,788 square feet of area. So from a land area and infrastructure improvement, it is a significant amount of land being dedicated back for transportation and infrastructure improvements. Our package demonstrates in detail that we meet all of the statutory requirements for closure of the street, closure of the alleys, as well as dedication of the streets, and that the closures will not disrupt the existing street grid network and will not block off access to anyone's property. Importantly, the proposed street grid is fully consistent with the recommendations in the Park Morton Redevelopment Initiative Plan, which was adopted by the council. And that re-initiative plan had a number of transportation street grid improvements, which we have incorporated into the plan that is currently in front of the council pursuant to this bill. I think Mr. Fossey mentioned the timing. I know there was a comment about access, but the reality is that the actual construction for parts north of Morton is not anticipated to be completed until the end of 2023, which is the time that we would actually have all of the closings and dedications done north of Morton. And the work as it relates to Morton and south of Morton would be done kind of in 2026. So no one who's currently on the site will lose their current access to their property. The project as designed has gone through a number of processes, including a zoning commission process. I know that's not before us today, but I would just point out that a lot of the concerns that you've heard today have come up in other forums and would be dealt with in those forums. I would refer you to page 3 of our submission. I will try to do a screen share. I don't know if it's going to work. The host has disabled participant screen share, so I cannot do a screen share. But if you look at page 3 of our submission, I'm just going to show you our screen here. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about, as indicated in the OP reports, as indicated in the new communities in the Park Morton Initiative Plan, and as indicated in the DDOT report, the existing street grid does not work. It poses transportation issues, it poses safety issues, it poses a number of significant issues, and that has been recognized again by the council in adoption of the Park Morton Plan, by OP, and by DDOT. The proposed new street grid includes street connections, it includes new alleys that will improve circulation within the project, and it will overall result in a more robust and improved transportation network for the site and connections to the city. And I have not heard anyone say that it would not, quite frankly. The package includes detailed reports, one from the Office of Planning, which again describes how the proposed network is consistent with and implements a lot of recommendations in the comprehensive plan. And you also have a DDOT report who, in this case, as well as the PUD case, support the proposed street grid and network. So from our perspective, the record demonstrates that the proposed closures of alleys and dedication of new streets meets the DC code standard for those actions, DC code section 9-202 and 9-203. We clearly, in our view, we clearly meet those standards. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure the rest of the team is available and happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. So I'm going to ask a few questions, then turn to my colleague, and then I'll have a few more questions after that. Ms. High, were you testifying on behalf of the council? They voted and you're testifying on their behalf, or are you testifying as an individual who happens to be the president of the council?
I'm testifying on behalf of the resident council at Park Morton.
Okay.
As the president.
Let me see, Mr. Fossey, in your statement, and I would appreciate if we could get a copy of your statement. I don't think it was included in the packet. You said that it would be affordable, quote, for the life of the project, unquote. I don't know if that's what the legal documents say, but what does that mean?
That means that it will be subject to a 99-year ground lease with the housing authority. And so you know, both by the way it is financed and by the ground lease from the authority remains affordable. Well, in perpetuity is usually, you know, a ground lease is 99 years. It's well past my perpetuity for sure.
Okay. And Mr. Freeman, the plat that we have as Exhibit B, it's written on it is written draft. Was that prepared by the surveyor?
Yes, it's prepared by the surveyor.
Can you walk me through it, or can I walk you through it?
Sure.
Looks like there are a couple of pieces, two, that are being closed. An alley on the sort of the upper left of the drawing. And
Correct.
a piece that is south of Morton Street where the circle is.
So there's actually three. So there's the alley that runs east-west. That's between in the left-hand side. There's a small stub in the where it says square 3039 lot 132. There's
Yes,
a
I
very
see that.
small stub there. And then the kind of south of Morton, there's the technically it's part of a street, so that is being closed as well. And again, this project is being developed in phases, so everything north of Morton would be done by 2023, kind of 2025 at the latest. We have asked for some flexibility there. And then kind of the east wing, the eastern portion of Morton Street and everything south of that would come later. So at some point between 2026 and 2028. So that's the anticipated timing. Page Exhibit B, this is actually a two-sided document. So the next side, the other side actually shows those three areas being closed.
Okay. So then the public right-of-way east-west be a fairly smooth Morton Street from west to east, looking west to east.
Correct.
The circle, I guess much of that circle right now is not public space.
So if I could, if whoever is controlling the screen could go to our narrative, page 3 of our narrative of our submission.
We'll see if that magic happens.
It looks like it's happening. And then maybe enlarge it so we can look at the right-hand side. So that shows a completed revised street grid. And in my mind, this is a little easier to understand. So what you'll see here is that Morton Street is extending kind of all the way through to Warder, W-A-R-D-E-R Street. And we're doing a new street, which on this it says New Street 2 and New Street 1. So that New Street 2 is 6th Street. And the New Street 1, that is intended to create a little circular park. The Park Morton Redevelopment Initiative called for the creation of pocket parks. So we're doing, again, significant infrastructure work in order to address this alignment, to create that park, as well as to add kind of smaller streets in order to another recommendation in the plan was traffic calming. So the width of the streets and the layout of the streets also serves the purpose of calming traffic. So folks can't speed through this residentially scaled area. And what you can hopefully see as it relates to alleys, where you see this apartment building, the coloring is unfortunate. It's a little hard to see, but kind of north-south and then east-west, we're dedicating back area for an alley so that there's a complete connection from Morton Street. You could, if you're on Morton, you could go north on that new yellow alley, then east, and then connect to New Street 2. Exactly, that's the new area. So we're leaving a small portion of the existing, and we're doing 2 new connections in order to make that a cleaner connection.
When I look at the plat, where you have New Street 1, it looks confusing to me because the diagonal lines are not the same width from east to west, from west to east or east to west.
Right, because part of it is a couple things. Part of it is your if you look north of Morton, you can see that it's adjacent to an alley. So some of that alley is becoming, I'm looking at the surveyor's plat. Part of that alley is becoming part of the street. And on the east to west portion of it, go to the prior page. So on the north-south portion, you can see kind of north of Morton that alley is becoming part of the street. And then on the south of Morton, the east-west portion, the part of that kind of between the dotted area and that circle, right now that's like a cul-de-sac. So there are a lot of
that's already public right of way, and therefore it doesn't need to be
correct.
Have the diagonal line.
Correct.
So I'm misreading it when I see that there's this cutout, if you will, of the right of way. That would be the right of way.
You're not misreading it. It's hard to read. I put it that way. That's why I went back to the image on page 6, page 3.
Okay. Now I have one other question regarding this, and that is for the new 6th Street. It on the north will connect with Park Road, but on the south, it looks like it connects with an alley, a 16-foot alley.
Correct.
Reading that correctly?
Correct. It dead ends into that alley, and what we've done and what we'll do is make sure those cross sections. You'll hear from DDOT at the end, so I don't want to speak for them, but make sure all of those cross sections kind of match up to meet DDOT standards for street and alley connections.
Well, that may be, but it's essentially like dead ending. 6th Street would dead end in an alley.
So that's true, but that street is really intended primarily to serve. If you go back to kind of page 3, they're really only in that segment of Morton Street. So where you see that there's really only like 4 homes kind of that face that part of the street. So there wouldn't be significant traffic utilizing that portion of 6th Street.
So it's just to serve those houses.
Correct.
Councilmember Nadeau, do you want to ask? Do you have questions?
No additional questions, Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Well, then I do have some additional ones. Mr. Jordan, you testified about an equity plan. I don't remember if Ms. Hill did as well. Does that equity plan exist in final form?
It's not in final form. It is a concept outline plan that calls for certain actions to modify the current development plan to be what we feel would be more in the interest of residents and less destructive. I could share a couple of the items. One, in the equity plan, we're asking that the building that they're proposing to build be split maybe into 2 buildings. Building 1 first, and that first building being a co-op, And the reason for that is, one, we feel it'd be less disruptive to build a smaller building. It will build confidence for the entire resident as well as community team that we're finally getting something done. And then by looking at a co-op, it actually gives residents an ownership stake, which is really the only way that they have full legal rights to any of the things that New Communities is talking about. Pretty much New Communities is a promise and one that's never been fulfilled. And we're looking for ways through the equity plan to lock in rights by slightly restructuring how it's built out to be less disruptive to residents.
Isn't the essence to revisit and rewrite the plan that's already been adopted, the development plan?
We feel that the changes can be made without major rewriting of anything. I mean, in my experience, all development plans evolve and change. So if instead of building 40 unit building, we build a 40 unit building and then 100 unit building that are detached, I'm sure there are some changes that would be required, but however, same number of units, it just changes how disruptive it is for who and when, and who's locked in.
Well, I'm guessing that if it was as easy as you're implying, that Mr. Freeman or Mr. Fossey or Mr. Benite could agree to it right now or would have agreed to it already, but they haven't. I could just, if they interrupt and say, yes, they do agree to it. And so if they don't, that suggests to me negotiation, which I think I actually heard in your testimony or somebody else's, which just further delays.
I don't believe, I mean, I don't see how we're talking 2023 for the first unit, right? And 2026, I think they've talked about. I don't think that our negotiations would impact outside of that window. In fact, I know they would not impact outside of that window.
Mr. Freeman?
If I'm understanding Mr. Jordan correctly, and I certainly don't want to impinge on his time, but I think it's important to remind or make sure everyone's aware that this is an approved PUD. We went through the PUD process, during which a couple of folks on this panel actually testified in support of that plan. And there's an approved PUD building. So to revise that plan and turn that one building into multiple buildings is not as simple as you may be hearing from Mr. Jordan.
I would respond that I didn't say it was easy, but it's something that should be done for the purposes of not only moving forward, but for the purposes of justice. So I maintain that we can build a 40 unit building faster than a 150 unit building. And also, so that's my position. If you all put that down and go through the process and show that it hurts the timeline, then we would not push for anything that's going to hurt the residents. We're trying to help the residents. However, we believe that also the benefits, even if it added, I don't know, 4 or 5 months to the process, 6 months to the process, that having an ownership stake makes along with the other things that we're requesting, I think Councilmember Nadeau talked about the REN, and the purpose of acquiring units there was to allow residents to have a location in the ward that they could count on. And by the city, what we're asking is that those units be done under a master lease so that residents know that those units are available to act as a support valve to what we're proposing, again, being less disruptive. So even if time is added, residents' stress levels and opportunity level within the board, within the ward, we believe will be improved.
Well, let me just a little bit. I got the sense from some of the testimony, and I'm thinking really of Empower DC, that there's a feeling that 1-for-1 needs to be on the site. Am I understanding that correctly? Because I want to understand why 1-for-1 has to be on the site as opposed to the government through public housing or vouchers providing replacement housing. Mr. Del Piago?
I think it's been the understanding of residents that they'll have the right to return. It says everyone has the right to return. So how will they return if there's only 57 units built on the site? And because, you know, it's up in the air when other replacement units will be provided, we need to ensure that folks aren't displaced all around the city.
Well, I think your answer kind of covers a couple of different issues. I don't know about a right to return to the site. Maybe I could ask Mr. Freeman if that's true. Was there a commitment of a right of return to the site?
So I'm land use counsel, but here's what I would say. The 1-for-1 replacement is spread across multiple sites, Bruce Monroe, as well as Park Morton, and the existing residents have the right to return. Again, I don't want to get too far.
So I think, so Karis, maybe it'd be better if myself and Rob jump in and just provide some additional background. So Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time. It's great seeing you even in these circumstances, and to Councilmember Nadeau, thank you again for your time, and to all the other witnesses here. It's good seeing everybody, and glad to see that everyone is fine and healthy. Mr. Chairman, the background here is, 6 years ago, everyone, including most of the witnesses here, all agreed on a plan. And that plan called for producing replacement units across 2 sites. One site, the first site was the Bruce Monroe site, which is less than a quarter mile away from the existing Park Morton site. And the second site is the site that is in question today. Unfortunately for everyone involved, and in addition to that plan, everyone, like our land use attorney mentioned earlier today, not only testified in front of the zoning commission in support of the PUD associated with the Bruce Monroe site as well as the Park Morton site, but they also testified in support of the disposition of both sites, both to this very same council. So at that time, everybody was on the same page in terms of what needed to happen to ensure that the residents of Park Morton were not in any way, shape, or form displaced, which is the core to my company's business as well as that of the community builders. Unfortunately for everybody, that plan has been somewhat disrupted due to the challenge, the PUD challenge on the Bruce Monroe site. There is nothing we can do about that. That is completely beyond everyone's control right here and now. And as a way to still move forward, albeit in a different means of producing replacement units for the Park Morton residents and to demonstrate our commitment for this site, we've decided for Plan B to now be Plan A. Granted, time have since passed and folks are probably having, folks may have forgotten what the original plan was or the original intent, or folks may have changed their mind, which they are clearly free to do. However, myself, Mr. Fossey, and the council member and everyone else here is committed on the original plan that we had set out to do. And as part of that original plan was the intent to close the alley, which was strongly suggested by the residents as a way to address some of the crimes issues that they were facing at the time due to the fact that the site was essentially a cul-de-sac and was a dead end. So we agreed that opening up the alley would address the crime issues, but at the same time provide a means for fire vehicles and other emergency vehicles to be able to get in and out of the site. So those were all of the mitigating factors that we all agreed and approached way back when. Granted, again, the original site is not happening and has not happened due to circumstances beyond our control. However, the intent of the overall plan is still taking place today. Thank you.
Chairman, can I shed a little more light on your question as well? Would that be okay?
In just a second. So Plan B, which is now Plan A, is to begin on the parcel north of Morton Street. Is that correct?
Correct.
Councilmember Nadeau?
Thank you, Chairman. So just to reiterate, and I think to get at the heart of your question with the vouchers, is the promise that was made, and I really think this is an important question for the government witnesses, because the Housing Authority is the one who has the most control over the situation. The promise that was made was that anyone living on site in 2014 would be allowed to return, whether they take a voucher right now, whether they move to another property right now, whether they remain on site, they would have the right to housing in the new development. So that's something that we at council have been really pushing the Housing Authority on. It's something that we had the Housing Authority and DEMP had actually signed into an MOU. And that was, I don't know if you remember when we voted on the last renewal of the LDA, we at council threatened to hold up that vote if the Housing Authority did not sign the MOU. So this is something that we have to hold the Housing Authority accountable for. And I think, you know, it is the promise that was made, and I have every intention of making sure that that in particular is fulfilled. And the reordering of the plans shouldn't impact that. So that's just a little bit more information for you.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
That's helpful. Ms. High.
Excuse me, Chairman Mendelson. I've been typing in the chat because I've had a lot to say about this and I haven't had a chance to get it all out. So I just wanted to let y'all know, if y'all have a chance, check the chat, because I've been a resident here at Park Morton for 19 years. I've been following this redevelopment since 2007 when Landex and Warrington Group were our first set of development teams, okay? When Dante's Partners and TCB were selected in November of 2014, we were told back in 2007, before Dante's Partners and TCB were selected, we were told that everybody would be able to come back. And then all of a sudden, they chopped it off when Dante's Partners and TCB was selected. So all of the people who were living on this property when Landex and Warrington Group were our development team from 2007 all the way up until 2014, all of those people, all of those families that were promised they could come back to this property have now been exiled from this development. So now anybody who's been here on the property on or before November 2014, those are the only families that can come back here. How was that fair to all of those families that was living here and put up with the shenanigans that they put up with the walls crumbling in around them, put up with the mice and the mold and the asbestos and everything else? How is that fair? How is it fair that they helped to design the very first redevelopment plan that actually is much, much better and provides much more housing than this current redevelopment plan? If y'all go back and look at the plan that the residents that Landex and Warrington Group engaged us residents in, we provided much more housing than Dante's Partners and TCB is currently providing. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Ms. Hyde, did I understand you to say that in 2014, it was promised that the residents would be able to return to the redeveloped Park Morton?
Yes, so there were
And
three
wait a minute.
promises.
I have a second question. And then did I hear you say that that was subsequently, how do I want to put it, revised so that only the residents who are there now, who were there in 2014, can come back to the redeveloped Park Morton? And how many residents are there now who were there in 2014?
You talking about how many are remaining at this time?
Correct.
According, and I'm using finger air quotes because nobody is really tracking anybody but me. According to DC Housing Authority and the steering committee, there are roughly about 79 families left.
So about,
and I personally don't think that there are that many left here.
okay, but if there's 79, and my understanding is there'll be 57 at the new redeveloped Park Morton, how does that difference get handled? Mr. Fossey or Mr. Benite?
So that is actually a question for the housing authority. I mean, certainly what we understand is that those who want to relocate to the remaining units at Park Morton during the construction can do so. Others who are seeking either temporary housing or permanent relocation can take advantage of those opportunities. And then once the new project is built, those units become available as the permanent one-for-one replacement unit. For that phase, we move to the on-site second phase, and of course, the Bruce Monroe phase, which has the majority of the units, and which we fully intend to move forward and develop as Councilmember Nadeau, I think, referenced earlier. And the only thing that has changed, and it's changed, it's been an imposed change. It's certainly not our preferred route. We got involved in this because we love the principles of NCI, the one-for-one replacement, the right to return, the income integration, and this is my personal view, specious lawsuit, which has delayed indefinitely the progress on Bruce Monroe, is really the reason that we're having this conversation today, rather than celebrating a ribbon cutting over on the first offsite phase and talking about how we're pivoting to this phase. So again, that's an unfortunate circumstance that we're all adapting to, and our adaptation to that is to try to accelerate the on-site phase so that we can provide the quality housing that the residents deserve.
I feel like I'm kind of stepping all over Ward 1, and I don't want to do that. Councilmember Nadeau, is there anything else you want to ask or say? And then I'm going to move to the government witnesses.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've had a really robust discussion today. I appreciate all the point of views here. Bottom line is, this is one piece of a larger project that's been approved multiple times by this body, by the ANC. None of us wanted to be here using Park Morton as the build first site, but we're doing everything we can to keep the project moving forward so that we can better serve the residents. So thank you very, very much for holding the hearing today, helping us move this forward. I know there's a lot on the Committee of the Whole's agenda, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I want to thank each of the witnesses and remind everybody the record will close in 2 weeks. So that's 5 p.m. on October 1st. So everyone is excused, and I'm going to turn to the government witnesses now. The government witnesses are Joseph Snyder, who is Deputy Surveyor at the Office of the Surveyor, and Anna Chamberlain, who is Associate Director for Planning and Sustainability at the District Department of Transportation. Now, I'm a little bit confused because ordinarily the surveyor testifies on all of the street and alley closings, but the testimony I have speaks only to Bill 23-522. Is that correct, Mr. Snyder?
Sir, if that's a 12-page document that you have, that is all the testimonies combined into one, I believe.
Yeah, I was taught in school that I should look through the entire document. You're right, I misspoke. Mr. Snyder, you want to begin, and then we'll turn to Ms. Chamberlain.
Will do. To preface, there are 3 different areas in the aggregate of the testimony where, since the time that we submitted this to your staff, there have been more recent comments. I would like to pause, just make you aware of that, and then continue the written testimony, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, members and staff of the Committee of the Whole. I am Joseph Snyder, Deputy Surveyor of the District of Columbia at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs. I appear before you today to provide testimony on 5 alley and street closing bills. First, B 23-522, closing a portion of Chesapeake Street Southwest, Magazine Road Southwest, and Keel Avenue Southwest, the removal of building restriction lines associated with the portion of Chesapeake Street Southwest being closed, and transfer of jurisdiction back to the Secretary of the Navy of the portion of Keel Avenue Southwest being closed in parcels 251-55, 251-56, 242-32, 252-62, 259-1, 259-11, 259-14, and 259-16 Act of 2019. The purpose of this bill 23-522 is to close portions of various streets, eliminate building restriction lines, and transfer administrative jurisdiction back to the Department of the Navy, as this property lies within the fence lines of the Navy's Bellevue Housing Complex in Ward 8. The applicant for this application is the Department of the Navy. The streets to be transferred and closed are shown on a transfer of jurisdiction plat dated July 10, 1941 in Subdivision Book 117 on pages 1 and 1A. Magazine Road Southwest, also known as Chesapeake Street, is shown on a plat dated March 26, 1929 and recorded in Subdivision Book 94 on page 29. Title to the portion of Chesapeake Street and Magazine Road could not be determined to be held by the District or United States. Keel Avenue, per use transfer to the District in 1941 by the U.S. Navy, appears to be held by the United States. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1, 2020, which represents tax year 2021 for the closed section of Magazine Road, Chesapeake Street Southwest, is estimated at $72,830. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1st, 2020, which represents tax year 2021, for the closed section of Keel Avenue is estimated at $133,920. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies on June 2nd, 2015. The executive branch agencies have no objections. The utility companies were notified of these applications on June 2nd, 2015. The utility companies in DC Water also have no objections. Pursuant to the DC Official Code 9-202.02, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on June 2nd, 2015. In a letter dated July 14th, 2015, NCPC found that the proposed street closings of Chesapeake Street and Magazine Road Southwest and Keel Road Southwest would not be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan for the National Capital. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8D was notified of these applications on June 3rd, 2015. In a letter dated June 17th, 2017, the commissioner from ANC 8D indicated no objection to the closings. Pursuant to DC Official Code 2-02.02, the abutting property owners were notified of the closings and transfer. Any comments from the abutting property owners will be forwarded to the council when received. I'm moving on to the second case. Turning now to B23-562, closing of Columbian Quarter Alley in Square 5860 Act of 2019. This bill orders the closing of a portion of a public alley in Square 5860, bounded by Howard Road Southeast, the U.S. Botanic Garden Nursery, and the Suitland Parkway in Ward 8. The bill was introduced by Councilmember Trayon White. The purpose of this alley closure is to facilitate the redevelopment of the site with mixed uses, including office space, housing, and retail. This closing is filed under SO 16-27269 in the Office of the Surveyor. The 15-foot wide partially improved alley to be closed was created by a subdivision of Square 5860. It was recorded in Subdivision Book 79 on page 95 on July 6, 1925 in the Office of the Surveyor. Title to the portion of the alley to be closed could not be determined to be held by the district or the United States. The most probable estimate of value of from the Office of Tax and Revenue as of January 1, 2020, which represents tax year 2021 for the public alley closed in Square 5860 is $285,460. The estimate is rounded and based on neighboring lots 1025, 1026, 1028 through 1031, and 1037 in the same square. The applicant for this closing is Poplar Point RBBR LLC, who is represented by Golson and Stores. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies on November 8, 2016. Within a letter dated August 3rd, 2020, the District Department of Transportation indicated DDOT has no objections to the alley closures on the following conditions. The official alley closure plat is updated with the following changes. Change public access easement terminology in non-restrictive easement throughout plat and label the easternmost 20-foot easement area using text similar to the 45-foot easement area. The applicant records non-restrictive easement for the two north-south private alleys proposed to replace the existing L-shaped public alley right-of-way to be closed. Pause. DDOT has a recent comment that we've been made aware of dated 9/16. I'll defer to their representative or the applicant for clarification. Continue. The remaining agencies have no objections to the proposed closing. The utility companies were notified on November 8, 2016, and they have no objections to the proposed closing. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission, who was notified on November 8, 2016, in a letter dated June 8, 2020. NCPC found that the proposed alley closing within Square 5860, located at 740 through 744 Howard Road Southeast in Washington, D.C., would not be inconsistent with the federal elements of the comprehensive plan for the national capital, nor would it adversely impact any other identified federal interests. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, Advisory Neighborhood Commission 8A was notified on November 8, 2016 in a letter dated October 8, 2019. ANC 8A indicated that it voted to support the proposed alley closing. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, the Surveyor's Office notified the abutting property owners on November 8, 2016. Any other comments regarding this closing will be forwarded when received. I will now discuss, I will now discuss Bill B23-580, closing of a public alley in Square 2892, SO 19-4 47478 Act of 2019. This bill would order the closing of a portion of a public alley in Square 2892. The bill was introduced by Councilmember Nadeau. This alley closure would provide for additional outdoor usable space and seating for the existing retail businesses located on the adjacent lots fronting on Georgia Avenue Northwest. The square is bounded by Lamont Street, Georgia Avenue, Kenyon Street, and Sherman Avenue Northwest and located in Ward 1. The 15-foot wide unimproved portion of alley to be closed was created by a subdivision of Square 2892. It was recorded in Subdivision Book 69 on page 73 and recorded on October 11, 1922 in the Office of the Surveyor. Title to the portion of the alley to be closed could not be determined to be held by the district or the United States. The most probable value for the closing of alley in Square 2892 as of January 1, 2020, which represents tax year 2021, is estimated at $119,140. The applicant for this closing is ZP Georgia LLC, who is represented by Holland and Knight. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies on May 30th, 2019. They either support or have no objections to the proposed closings. The utility companies were also notified on May 30, 2019, and have no objections. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, the Office of the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission on May 30, 2019. In a letter dated July 1, 2019, NCPC determined that the proposed project falls under an exemption listed in Chapter 8 of NCPC's submission guidelines. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1A was notified on May 30, 2020. DCRA received a letter from ANC Commissioner Mr. Michael Ray dated September 24, 2019 in support of this closing. Pursuant to DC Code 9-202.02, the abutting property owners were notified of the closing. Any comments received regarding this closing will be forwarded when received. The next bill that I will discuss is B 23-656, closing of a public alley in Square 740, SO 18-41567, Act of 2019. This bill would order the closing of a 12-foot wide public alley in Square 740 and establish a 20-foot wide public alley surface easement in its place. Square 740 is bounded by K Street Southeast to the north, New Jersey Avenue Southeast to the east, L Street Southeast to the south, and First Street Southeast to the west in Ward 6. The bill was introduced by Councilmember Allen. This closure would allow for the development of a 4-level underground garage and 2 proposed buildings. The proposed buildings would be connected by the garage underneath the proposed alley easement. The alley to be closed was created by a subdivision of Square 740 recorded in Subdivision Book NK on page 250 on August 22nd, 1842 in the records of the Office of the Surveyor. Title to the portion of the alley to be closed could not be determined to be held by the district or the United States. The most probable estimate of value as of January 1st, 2020, which represents tax year 2021 for the public alley closed in Square 740 is $2,174,840. The estimate is rounded and based on lot 43 of the same square. The applicant for this closing is Watts on Second Properties, LLC, and Paradigm Investment Group Services, LP, who is represented by Holland and Knight. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies of this closing on March 19, 2019. The executive branch agencies have no objections. DC Water was notified of the closing on March 19, 2020. DC Water responded with a letter dated March 21st, 2019, objecting to the closing because they have an existing 3-inch water main and a 12-inch combined sewer, both in the alley. DC Water wants a non-restrictive easement from the applicant for its facilities. Other utility companies were notified of the application on March 19, 2020. They did not have any objections. Pursuant to DC Code 9-202.02, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of this application on March 19, 2019. In a letter dated May 3rd, 2019, NCPC found that the proposed closure in alley in Square 740 would not be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan for the National Capital, nor would it adversely affect any other identified federal interest. Pursuant to DC Code 9-202.02, Advisory Neighborhood Commission 6D01 and 6D02 were notified of this application on March 19, 2019. The Surveyor's Office has not had a response from the ANC. However, a letter was provided from Holland and Knight to Councilmember Allen's office from ANC 6D. The letter dated January 6, 2020, noted that at their regularly scheduled meeting, they voted to unanimously support with conditions the proposed alley closing. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-02.02, the abutting property owners were notified of the closing. The applicant is the owner of all the abutting property. Any other comments regarding this closing will be forwarded when received. Finally, I will discuss B 23-784, closing of public streets and alleys and dedication of land for public streets and alley purposes adjacent to squares 3039, 3040, and 3042 Act of 2020. This bill would order the closing of a portion of Morton Street Northwest adjacent to squares 3039 and 3040, close a portion of a public alley in square 3039, accept the dedication of 2 new streets, 6th Street Northwest and Luray Place Northwest, extend Morton Street Northwest adjacent to squares 3039, 3040, and 3043, and accept the dedication of land in square 3039 for public alley purposes in Ward 1. The bill was introduced by Councilmember Nadeau. The purpose of this bill is to allow for the new communities project at Park Morton. The portions of the alley system to be closed were created by 2 plats. The first was a plat for the closing of Morton Street and public alleys in squares 3039, 3040, and 3043, and the dedication of land for Morton Street and public alleys in the same square. It was recorded in Subdivision Book 129 on page 36 on July 23, 1959. The second was a plat of subdivision recorded in Subdivision Book 129 on page 127 on August 28, 1959. The portion of Morton Street Northwest to be closed was created by the same plat for the closing of Morton Street and public alleys in square 3039, 3040, and 3043, and the dedication of land for Morton Street and public alleys in the same squares. It was recorded in Subdivision Book 129 on page 36 on July 23, 1959. Title to the portion of the alleys and street to be closed cannot be determined to be held by the district or the United States. The probable estimated value as of January 1, 2020, which represents tax year 2021, for the public street and alleys closed in square 3039 and 3040 is $628,830. This estimate was determined as follows. Public alleys closed in square 3039 is $189,550. 1,573 square feet times 98.01 estimated square footage, plus 361 square feet times $98.01 estimated square footage. The estimates are rounded and based on lots 130 to 132 in the same square. The public street closed in square 3040 is $439,280. The estimate is rounded and based on lot 125 in square 3040 and lot 846 of square 3039. The applicants for these closings and dedication are Park View Community Partners, the District of Columbia Housing Authority, and the District of Columbia, who are represented by Holland and Knight. The Office of the Surveyor notified the relevant executive branch agencies on September 5, 2017. The Department of Transportation responded within a letter dated March 16, 2018, objecting to the closings and dedication until DDOT was compensated $2,427.20 for the removal of existing street lighting. They also required that tree removal permits be obtained for 3 trees prior to the closing of the Morton Street section. Pause. DDOT has a more recent comment dated 9/15. I'll defer to their representative or the applicant for clarification on that. Continuing. The remaining executive branch agencies have no objections. DC Water responded within a letter dated September 8, 2017, objecting to the closings and dedication. They objected because they operate and maintain the following facilities on Morton Street: 2 8-inch water mains, 1 15-inch combined sewer, and 1 12-inch combined sewer. DC Water did not provide a proposed easement agreement to lift their objection at the time of their response. The Office of the Surveyor has not received the executed easement or a letter lifting their objection. The other utility companies were notified of these applications on September 5, 2017, in a letter dated July 20, 2020. Verizon lifted their objection to the closings and dedication. In a letter dated August 19, 2020, Pepco had no objection to the closings or dedication. In a letter dated April 10, 2019, Washington Gas objected to the closings and dedication due to the fact that they have active natural gas facilities within the limits of the proposed street closure. Pause. Washington Gas has a more recent communication dated 9/17. I'll defer to their representative or the applicant for clarification. Continuing. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, the Surveyor's Office notified the National Capital Planning Commission of these applications on September 5, 2017. In a letter dated October 11, 2017, NCPC found that the proposed closures of street and alleys in squares 3039, 3040, and 3043 located at 617 Morton Street Northwest and the proposed dedication of land for the opening of new streets in alleys in squares 3039, 3040, and 3043 located at 617 Morton Street Northwest would not be inconsistent with the comprehensive plan for the national capital, nor would it adversely affect any other identified federal interest. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1A was notified of these applications on September 5, 2017. In a letter dated July 8, 2020, ANC 1A supported the closings and dedication. Pursuant to DC Official Code 9-202.02, the abutting property owners were notified of the closings and dedication. Any comments received regarding this application will be forwarded when received. This concludes my testimony. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and welcome any questions you may have regarding this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Ms. Chamberlain, and I should have asked Mr. Snyder to connect his video. So if you would now, and thank you. Ms. Chamberlain.
Sure. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council, staff, and district residents. My name is Anna Chamberlain, and I'm the Associate Director of the Planning and Sustainability Division at the District Department of Transportation, also known as DDOT. I'm here today to present testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser and DDOT Director Meridian regarding the 5 bills that we've all been discussing today, which are Bill 23-522, and I'll try to shorten these a bit. The closing portion of Chesapeake Street, Magazine Road, and Keel Avenue Southwest, the Act of 2019. Bill 23-562, the closing of Porter Alley in Square 5860, Act of 2019. Bill 23-580, the closing of a public alley in Square 2892, SO 19-47478, Act of 2019. Bill 23-656, the closing of a public alley in Square 740, SO 18-41567, Act of 2020. And finally, Bill 23-784, the closing of public streets and alleys and dedication of land for public and alley purposes adjacent to squares 3039, 3040, and 3043, and the associated SO 17-21093 and SO 17-21094, Act of 2020. The stated purpose of the first bill, 23-552, is to close a portion of Chesapeake Street, Magazine Road, and Keel Avenue, all in Southwest, and transfer the jurisdiction to the Department of Navy. DDOT filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor, as already mentioned, on September 22nd, 2015, related to the SO number 14-21786. And in it, DDOT report noted that there are no DDOT assets in the proposed area to be closed, and that the closure would not negatively impact the transportation network, traffic circulation, future planned DDOT improvements, or the public space. As such, DDOT has no objections to the proposed closures in this bill. Second bill, the stated purpose of Bill 23-580 is to close a portion of the public alley system in Square 2892, bounded by Lamont Street, Georgia Avenue, Kenyon Street, and Sherman Avenue Northwest. DDOT filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on August 13, 2019, related to the SO number 47478. In DDOT's report, we noted that there are no DDOT assets identified in the areas proposed to be closed, and that the closure is not projected to negatively impact the transportation network, traffic circulation, planned DDOT improvements, or public space. And as such, DDOT has no objections to the proposed closures in this bill. Third bill, the purpose stated is on Bill 23-784 is to close a portion of Morton Street Northwest and portions of the public alley system adjacent to Square 3039, all in Ward 1. It accepts the dedication and designation of 6th Street Northwest, Ray Place Northwest, and an extension of Morton Street Northwest for public street purposes, and accepts the dedication of land adjacent to Square 3039 for public alley purposes. DDOT filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor March 16, 2018, related to the 2 Surveyor SO numbers 17-21093 and 17-21094. In our report, we noted that we objected to the proposed closure until the following conditions are met: that the 2 SOs, SO number 17-21093 and 17-21094, be approved together, such that the right-of-ways are not closed without the corresponding dedication of new right-of-way in order to achieve the revised transportation network envisioned in the planned unit development proposal associated with these closures, which was brought up earlier in earlier testimony. We wanted to make sure there's still public access available to the residents. And in addition, that the applicant should compensate the district for the amount of $2,427.20 for the removal of existing DDOT assets, which is lighting, in the areas proposed for closure. In addition, finally, the applicant must secure tree removal permits for 3 trees, street trees that were identified that would be affected by the closure of the Morton Street segment. And in addition, it's DDOT's understanding that by its incorporation into this bill, council intends to fulfill the first condition, which is the coordination of the closures with the appropriate land dedication. On September 14th, 2020, the applicant's legal counsel confirmed that the applicant will meet this condition along with the conditions related to the compensation for the removal of the street lighting and will secure the necessary tree removal permits. DDOT notes that Section 3 of Bill 23-784 stipulates that the council's approval of the closures and land dedications are contingent upon the satisfaction of all conditions set forth in the official files for SO number 17-21093 and 17-21094 prior to the recordation of plats by the surveyor. DDOT also notes that through an administrative oversight, conditions related to the applicant's building of public space improvements and DDOT's acceptance of the improvements do not appear in the list of conditions on the final page of DDOT's 2018 report to the surveyor. It is DDOT's understanding that since those conditions appear earlier in the report, they were intended to and should be incorporated into the set of conditions specified under Section 3 of this bill. The applicant's legal counsel confirmed on September 14th, 2020, that the applicant will meet DDOT's conditions related to the construction and acceptance of public space improvements. The next bill, the stated purpose of Bill 23-656 is to close a portion of the public alley system in Square 740, bounded by K Street Southeast, First Street, L Street Southeast, and New Jersey Avenue Southeast in Ward 6. DDOT filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on February 14th, 2020, related to SO number 18-41567. DDOT's report noted that the agency objected to the proposed closure until several conditions are met. These conditions include compensation for the removal of DDOT lighting in the area to be closed, meeting with DDOT's arborist to determine whether or not a special tree permit is needed for any impacted trees, and conditions associated with the non-restrictive easement that would establish a replacement alley network. On April 1st, 2020, DDOT filed a supplemental report indicating our understanding that the applicant has agreed to all conditions. DDOT can confirm that the applicant has provided payment for the removal of the street lighting and has obtained the necessary special tree permits. DDOT is still awaiting the full documentation of the necessary non-restrictive easement. DDOT notes that Section 3 of Bill 23-656 stipulates that the council's approval of the closure is contingent upon the recordation of a covenant establishing new portions of the alley system by easement and upon the satisfaction of all conditions set forth in the official file for SO number 18-41567. Now, the stated purpose of Bill 23-562 is to close the 15-foot wide public alley in Square 5860, abutting lots 1020, 1025 through 1031, 1037, and P 231/8, along with Square 5600, Lot 800, and Ward 8. DDOT filed a report with the Office of the Surveyor on September 3rd, 2020, related to the SO number 16-27269. DDOT's report noted that the agency objected to the proposed closure until the following conditions are met: that the DDOT could support the locations of the 45-foot and 20-foot easement areas shown in Figure 1 of the report of our report to the surveyors, which is an updated plan that was dated September 3rd, 2020, so long as the official alley closure plat is updated with the following changes. Change public access easement terminology to non-restrictive easement throughout the plat, and label the easternmost 20-foot easement area using text similar to the 45-foot easement area. The applicant records non-restrictive easements for the 2 north-south private alleys proposed to replace the existing L-shaped public alley right-of-way to be closed. DDOT seeks confirmation that the applicant will fulfill all of these conditions, although in previous testimony, it seems they disagree with the non-restrictive easement request. DDOT also notes that as introduced, Bill 23-562 lacks a section making council's approval of the closure contingent on any specific conditions, including the conditions set forth in the official file with the Office of the Surveyor. DDOT recommends that the bill include such conditions consistent with the formulations of Bills 23-656 and 23-784. This concludes my testimony. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Thank you, Mr. Snyder. I do have a few questions. I think this is mostly technical. First, Mr. Snyder, I have plats for each of these bills. I want to just confirm that these plats came from your office.
Yes, sir, they did. All of the plats in today's hearing came directly from our office.
Okay. And in your testimony, you went through objections. My recollection was that there was an objection, I think it was Park Morton from Washington Gas, which you say has been resolved. If either you or I'm assuming that the developer's representative is still watching, could provide us with a copy of that letter releasing Washington Gas's objection. If I remember correctly, there were no other utility objections with any of these 5 bills. Does that sound right, Mr. Snyder?
Correct. I had 2 areas where I paused for DDOT, and I believe Ms. Chamberlain answered, reflected what their most recent comments and concerns were for those. Washington Gas was the only other one. I believe I do have the letter, which I will forward to your staff member, Mr. Stum. And I don't know if the applicant has it or not. I'm assuming that they do, but I'm going to go ahead and forward that to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Ms. Chamberlain, let me see. I have several questions. We'll start with Park Morton. I think in your testimony you referred to street names: 6th Street, Luray Place. There was another name. Those are not official names, are they?
Some of them are official names. They're extensions. So there's extension of Morton Street. Other ones which they had, I guess we referenced some of the names that they had used in the PUD, which I think now they've switched to just Street 1 and Street 2. But the 6th Street is one as well.
Because I need some certainty on this. The council has the authority to name streets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want there to be implied street naming. If you could just double check on that and tell us what DDOT believes with regard to street names. Ms. Chamberlain, I also want to ask you about restricted as opposed to public easement. And this was something that seems to be an issue with the Howard Road bill. Doesn't seem to be an issue with any of the others, if I remember.
Correct.
What is that about?
So a non-restrictive easement is basically a replacement for a public street or a public alley. A public access easement provides the public with limited rights to use. The public access easement just allows the public to use it, but it's still subject to the owner's right to close and otherwise use it for themselves. And in either scenario, they get to keep the FAR, which is generally the main concern or the main reason behind a lot of these closures, to be able to increase density in their project. But we only ask for non-restrictive easements in locations where a replacement street or alley mitigates the future negative impacts to the network.
I was taking some notes. So non-restrictive would be the same as a public street or alley. And a public access simply gives the public, gives public agencies access?
No, for the public access easement, you mean?
Yes.
Public access easement just says that the public can use it, but it's still subject to the private property owner desires and wishes, which they could close for special events, or they can, as it has been discussed, build over it. They can design it in such a way where it actually doesn't feel or look public.
And with regard to Howard Road, but with Howard Road, you're using a different term, non-restrictive easement.
Correct. In the non-restrictive easement, it is subject to public space requirements and public space rules. And in that case, we do think the alley network is an important one. The actual project itself has changed multiple times. The design has changed multiple times. And we do feel, depending on what becomes the final development proposal, that that alley is actually very important to provide access if the property divides into multiple properties. And we do feel that it's an important access to maintain.
Okay, I confused myself in my questioning. You want, if I can characterize the non-restrictive as being the more public of the two, you want the more public.
Correct.
Okay. There was a reference, I think it was in your testimony, Ms. Chamberlain, about a letter dated September 14th in which the applicant agreed to various things. Was that Park Morton?
Yes.
Can you provide that to us, please?
Absolutely.
And if the developer's representative is listening, maybe they can provide it as well. Why is it that the issue of a non-restrictive easement is important with Howard Road, but it doesn't come up with the K Street, L Street, First Street project at Square 740? You didn't raise the concern there.
Yeah, in that situation, they mentioned the agreements that have been discussed with them. And so there's two ways, I guess, you can achieve the non-restrictive use. Well, not necessarily, it's not exactly like a non-restrictive, but in that particular case with the K Street, it was already previously agreed to, and then we were able to come into the conditions that they mentioned regarding non-closure of the street, only having one access point connecting above the alley. And so that's in a separate covenant. Whereas the non-restrictive, we don't need to go into all these covenants and et cetera. They would have to come for public space permitting.
Well, would it make sense, or would there be a problem with the council having in its legislation the same language for the two projects, is that there has to be a non-restrictive public easement?
It is our preference, but in the case of the L Street, as they mentioned, they want to vault under it with parking and they want to connect those two buildings. So if you do the non-restrictive easement, now they'll have to go an extra step and get some permitting for those.
Okay. Does the SO record have the covenant that's been filed?
No.
Should we have that in the record?
That I wouldn't be sure if you guys need it or not, but we can work on that.
Well, you have it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you could provide it. I guess that's a nice way of asking if you would provide it.
Yes.
Let me just see if there are any other questions I have. Give me just a second. Oh, on the Howard Road, do you also have a condition about labeling on the plat? Is that just a technical issue that you want?
Yeah, yes, it's just technical and to clarify.
I'm assuming that the developer or their representatives are listening with regard to the Columbian Quarter Alley. I think I'm going to need to hear from them why we shouldn't be going along with DDOT's request with regard to a non-restrictive easement. I think my only other question, which is maybe more of a curiosity, is just the first one, which was on joint base bowling. This one just feels different to me, and maybe that's because all the other alley closings have something happening with the land reverting, the new transportation network, and here, I'm going to put it a little crudely, we just don't care. So we're just going to close these public streets. They're just going to disappear. There's no replacement. There's no thought about a street network. I think DDOT said it's not necessary for the street network. But it just feels like there's something missing here. And we're okay with that. I think this question is of both Ms. Chamberlain and Mr. Snyder.
Yeah, in our review, we were surprised that they were actually public right-of-way. Again, I don't know the history and how they were created, but it does seem like an odd leftover piece of the network. And since it's all internal and not connecting, it doesn't actually provide the circulation or the connections that we feel that the public needs.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, do you have any comment in response to the questions I've been putting to Ms. Chamberlain?
I agree with her statement about it. Literally, these streets are all within the fenced off, and one of the streets where Magazine Road comes in, there's actually bollards preventing anybody from going in. They've just been using those spaces privately. I think there is some roadway, but I would more classify them as driveways that are just used internally by the Department of Navy. I think this is a fidelity thing, is my opinion about it. Just closing these paper streets so they can use the streets privately. I don't know if you want to consider the Department of Navy private or not, but that's my take on it.
Okay. With regard to the other issues I discussed with Ms. Chamberlain, relabeling the Howard Road plat. Do you have any issues there?
Is that to me with regards to
Yes.
changing the labeling? There's no
Yes.
problem with that. As long as we're notified that that's going to be the final version, we'll update it. It'll be easy.
Okay, we'll work with your office. I'll also need a clean plat for the Park Morton, the one that I have has draft written on it and handwriting. We'll be working with you. Let me just check with my, see if there are any other questions. I did not have any other questions. Thank you, each of you, for your testimony. Appreciate it. And you all are excused. This has been a hearing again on 5 bills. And the record with regard to this hearing will close at 5 p.m. on October 1st, 2020. So where I've asked for documents, I'd appreciate getting them by then or sooner. And if anybody else wishes to submit testimony by 5 p.m. on October 1st, for if they want it included in the record. Thank you all. I want to thank everybody. And the time is now 1:03 in the afternoon, and this hearing is adjourned.